In 1962, George Maharis was at the peak of his fame. Route 66 made him a household name and teen heartthrob. His producer treated him like family. Then the producer discovered something about Maharis that shattered their relationship forever. What he learned wasn't illegal, but in 1960s Hollywood, it was career suicide. The producer's reaction was swift and brutal. He launched a campaign to destroy Maharis completely. The fallout ended one of television's biggest hits and ruined a friendship that could never be repaired. George Maharis was born on September 1, 1928, in Astoria, Queens. He was the third of 6 children born to Greek immigrants Vasidos, who later went by William and Demetra Maharis. His father had started with nothing and built a restaurant business that kept the family steady during the Depression. Later, they moved to Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, a neighborhood famous for its crime and poverty. Yet even there, the restaurant's success gave them a security most immigrant families didn't have. They held on to their Greek traditions while chasing the American dream through food. George grew up in this world, watching his father serve everyone from dock workers to men you might not want to meet in a dark alley. It gave him an early education in human nature and street life. Years later, that same understanding would shape his ability to play working-class, streetwise characters. His parents' journey from nothing to running a small restaurant empire became the model of hard work and persistence that stayed with him for life. From an early age, George dreamed of singing. At Flushing High School, his classmates admired his voice. In his 20s, he threw himself into musicals outside New York City, taking odd jobs to pay the bills. But too much performing combined with bad vocal training destroyed his voice. The damage was permanent. His singing dream ended before it had truly begun. It was a crushing blow. The irony is that years later, when he was famous for acting, he recorded 6 albums with epic records. One of his songs, Teach Me Tonight, climbed to number 25 on the Billboard Hot 100. The voice injury that closed one door pushed him through another, leading him to discover acting, which would become his true path. Before any of that, he left high school early and joined the United States Marine Corps. He served for exactly 18 months. Military life hardened him and gave him discipline, something that would serve him long after. When his service ended, he went back to finish high school. He worked in construction, restaurants, and other blue-collar jobs while chasing his singing dream. Those years gave him first-hand experience with the kind of people he would later portray so convincingly on screen. In the 1950s, he trained at the neighborhood playhouse with Sanford Meisner and at the Actors Studio with Lee Strasberg. These were the best acting schools in America. Meisner taught him how to live truthfully in each moment on stage, while Strasberg drilled the emotional memory work that defined method acting. Maharis absorbed it all during the height of the method movement, when Brando, Dean, and Clift were changing the way America acted. That training gave him a deep, brooding style that set him apart from most TV actors of his time. He began making a name for himself off-Broadway in the late 1950s. His role in Jean Genet's Death Watch put him in the spotlight with a dark, dangerous character. Then came The Zoo Story by Edward Albee, where he played a killer. These performances were raw and risky, and they caught the attention of Otto Preminger, who cast him in his film Exodus in 1960. It was a major leap, working alongside Paul Newman and with a screenplay by Dalton Trumbo. The film made over $8.7 million in the US and $20 million worldwide, and it helped break Hollywood's blacklist against suspected communists. His television break had come earlier in 1955 on Mr. Peepers. He played a parody of Marlon Brando so sharp and funny that it became legendary, despite the fact he had only seen Brando act once before. Ironically, Maharis would later be compared to Brando for his own serious roles. In 1959, he appeared in an episode of Naked City called Four Sweet Corners, where he played a young veteran returning from Japan. The episode's theme of restless wandering inspired the creation of Route 66. The producers had already decided Maharis would be one of the leads. Route 66 paired him with Martin Milner, and their chemistry was unforgettable. Maharis was the street-tough rebel, Milner the clean-cut searcher. They were so different in real life that it made the acting effortless. When Glenn Corbett replaced Maharis later, the balance was gone, and audiences felt it immediately. The show itself broke ground by filming entirely on location. Over 4 seasons, they shot in 25 states and even Toronto, writing scripts for each location after scouting. They filmed on oil rigs, in logging camps, at raceways, even at Glen Canyon Dam, while it was still being built. The name Route 66 was almost misleading. The actual highway was barely featured, but the series captured America as it was then, with its different accents, jobs, and local cultures. George Maharis aride the weight of the working-class struggle in his voice and in his walk. Every glance, every pause came from the method acting lessons he soaked up at the Actors Studio with Lee Strasberg. It made him real. It made him dangerous. And in 1962, it made him an Emmy nominee for Outstanding Lead Actor. He had the look, he had the grit, and he had a Corvette. That car wasn't just a car. On Route 66, it became America's dream machine. Chevrolet made sure of it, handing the show a new Corvette every year. The first was a 1960 model in the pilot shot in February 1960. Then came the 1961 and 1962 models, until the third season unveiled the brand new 1963 Stingray convertible in fawn beige. America saw it on TV every week and wanted one in their driveway. Maharis even tricked Chevrolet into giving him his own Corvette by claiming he had a Ford Thunderbird that would show up on screen. Fame brought other doors. Between 1962 and 1966, Maharis recorded dozens of singles with Epic Records. His first album, George Maharis Sings, spent 29 weeks on the Billboard chart, peaking at number 10. His biggest hit, Teach Me Tonight, reached number 25 on the Hot 100 and stayed for 11 weeks. It climbed to number 8 on the Easy Listening chart. He followed with Love Me As I Love You, which hit number 17 that September. In 1963, he sang Side by Side with Judy Garland on her show. Epic even released singles with his photo on the sleeve. His last release came in 1966, a farewell to his brief but notable music career. But 1962 brought something far worse than fame: hepatitis. Halfway through season 3, Maharis was hospitalized for a month. Route 66's schedule was punishing: 12 to 15 hours a day, always on location. No studio safety net. He believed he recovered quickly at first, because he didn't drink, but the disease would never truly leave him. 60 years later, when he died at 94, hepatitis complications were still part of the cause. The danger wasn't just illness. In one episode, Maharis spent hours standing in a near-freezing creek for a rescue scene. Multiple takes left him chilled to the bone. Weeks later, his hepatitis relapsed. This was the cost of authentic TV. Crews of 50 or 60 worked through rain, snow, heat, whatever nature gave them. Seasons ran 22 to 30 episodes, more than double what most shows make today. It was a grind that broke people. Doctors warned him. One told him flatly, "Leave now, or you'll die, or your liver will be ruined forever." They said it in person and in writing. Producers ignored it. They wanted him back on set, sick or not. Maharis summed it up with a grim truth: even if you have $4 million in the bank, you can't buy another liver. Still, they kept pushing, and he kept sliding downhill. While he recovered, the show tried to survive without him. Martin Milner carried solo episodes, rewriting scripts to make Todd Stiles travel alone. It was a temporary fix, but the absence of Buzz Murdoch was impossible to hide. When Maharis came back in the spring of 1962, he hoped to finish his contract. The schedule crushed him again. The relapse that followed ended everything. Producers accused him of faking illness to chase film roles. They even stopped him from appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show in June 1963. Maharis fired back, saying Hollywood couldn't treat actors like meat anymore. He won legally, proving his contract was void. By then, the magic was gone. Glenn Corbett replaced him, but the show limped to its end in March 1964. In 1962, Herbert B. Leonard thought he had built the perfect television star. George Maharis was young, handsome, and exactly the kind of man women tuned in to see. Leonard had cast him in Route 66 not just for his acting, but for the image, a dark, romantic heartthrob to balance Martin Milner's clean-cut charm. The show's marketing revolved around this image. Posters, magazine spreads, even plot lines were crafted to make Maharis irresistible to female viewers. Then Leonard learned something that, to him, changed everything. Maharis was gay. In Leonard's mind, this wasn't just personal news. It was betrayal. He felt the foundation of his show had been built on a lie, that Maharis had accepted a role designed to sell heterosexual fantasy while living a different truth. From that moment, trust between them was gone. Every conversation carried tension. Every decision was colored by suspicion. The production team scrambled to keep Maharis's private life away from the press. In the 1960s, being outed could end a career overnight. They monitored him constantly, worried that one wrong move would hit the tabloids. Their fears weren't unfounded. Years later, Maharis would be arrested in 1967 and again in 1974 for charges like lewd conduct and sex perversion in public places. In 1967, it was in Hollywood with a male companion. In 1974, it was at a Los Angeles gas station with hairdresser Perfecto Teles, leading to a $500 bail. In that era, these arrests were career killers, and the producers had been living in fear of exactly that kind of exposure. Leonard's mistrust grew when Maharis fell ill during filming. He had contracted hepatitis from a contaminated needle, but Leonard didn't believe it. He was convinced it was an excuse to get out of his contract or demand more money. Writer-producer Sterling Siliphant and co-star Martin Milner sided with Leonard, and in a less hostile time, maybe they could have worked things out. But not in that climate. By 1963, Maharis walked away from the show for good, and his television stardom ended with that choice. The fear wasn't just personal, it was systemic. In 1960, anti-sodomy laws existed in all 50 states. President Eisenhower's Executive Order 10450 had already led to 5,000 federal workers losing their jobs for being gay. Hollywood wasn't much different. The Lavender Scare had made it clear that one accusation could ruin everything. For gay actors, every day was a gamble. Leonard didn't just let Maharis go, he came after him. His company, Lancer Productions, filed a lawsuit to keep Maharis from working anywhere in the entertainment industry as long as he was under contract. The case pulled in CBS, Screen Gems, lawyers, agents, accountants, all aligned against him. It wasn't about damages, it was about making sure Maharis never worked again. On June 16, 1963, Maharis was set to sing on The Ed Sullivan Show. For most actors, this was a dream stage. Millions of viewers, a chance to reset a career. Hours before the broadcast, Leonard's team got a court injunction to block the appearance. They claimed Maharis was still under contract and faking his illness. The cancellation made headlines and humiliated Maharis publicly. It sent a warning to anyone else who might hire him. Do so, and you might face legal trouble too. The producers didn't stop there. They went to the press, calling him selfish, unprofessional, and accusing him of caring only about film roles. They dismissed his illness as fake, painting him as a man with no regard for his co-star or the crew. It was character assassination, calculated to make him toxic in Hollywood. Maharis didn't stay silent. He fired back, calling out the old Hollywood system that treated actors like property. There isn't any more old Hollywood where a company can buy movie stars like pieces of meat, he said. He defended his illness with medical records and reminded everyone of his years of dedication to the show. But defying powerful producers came with a price. When the court finally ruled in his favor, voiding the contract, it was already too late. His first TV appearance after the win came on July 2, 1963. But the industry had moved on. The damage was done. Even the producers, after losing, tried to reconcile. But by then, Route 66 was a shadow of itself. Glenn Corbett, Maharis's replacement, couldn't recreate the chemistry, and the show was canceled in March 1964. In the end, both sides lost. Maharis had his freedom, but not his career. Leonard had his show, but without its spark. George Maharis left television determined to become a movie star. But instead of stardom, he ran into one failure after another. From 1964 to 1969, he starred in 5 major films, and every single one of them bombed. His first was Quick Before It Melts in 1964. It flopped. Then came Sylvia in 1965, a melodrama that couldn't find its audience. 2 years later, both A Covenant with Death and The Happening crashed hard at the box office. His final blow came in 1969 with The Desperados, which sealed the end of his movie career. These weren't small disappointments. They were disasters that lost millions. Studios started seeing him as a risk. The scripts were weak, the direction uninspired, and Maharis's television charm didn't translate to the big screen. By 1970, his fee had dropped from 6 figures to whatever he could get. His dream of movie stardom was over. Television was all he had left. There was one exception. In 1965, Maharis starred in The Satan Bug, a $6 million science fiction thriller directed by John Sturges. He played Lee Barrett, a former intelligence agent chasing stolen bioweapons capable of wiping out humanity. The film had a strong cast, including Richard Basehart, Anne Francis, and Dana Andrews, and a musical score by Jerry Goldsmith. It even made history with the first use of a stabilized camera mount on a helicopter. Critics said Maharis gave his best performance here, showing range and presence he hadn't displayed before. But it didn't matter. The movie failed commercially, disappearing from theaters almost as fast as it arrived. This was the cruelest blow. If even his best work couldn't bring in an audience, Hollywood wasn't going to give him another chance. In 1970, he tried to return to his roots with a television series called The Most Deadly Game. Produced by Aaron Spelling, the show had Maharis as criminologist Jonathan Croft, solving unusual murders with Ralph Bellamy and Yvette Mimieux. Spelling had wanted Inger Stevens for the female lead, but her suicide before filming forced a last-minute change. Despite the big names behind it, the scripts were weak, and the chemistry between the leads just didn't work. It premiered on October 10, 1970, but ABC pulled the plug by January 16, 1971, just 12 episodes in. The short run showed that even television, the place where Maharis had once thrived, couldn't save him now. The final blow came not from the box office, but from Hollywood's unspoken blacklist. During Route 66, producer Herbert B. Leonard had worked hard to hide Maharis's private life from the press. But in 1967, Maharis was arrested for lewd conduct. Another arrest came in 1974 for sex perversion. In an era when being openly gay could kill a career, this was the end. Producers felt betrayed. Casting directors stopped calling. No official ban was needed. His name simply disappeared from consideration. Even when he tried to work again, the industry saw him as poison. On December 15, 1967, George Maharis's career hit a wall he would never climb over. That night, in a Hollywood restaurant's men's restroom, a Vice Squad officer said Maharis made sexual advances toward him. It wasn't random. Police had set up a sting, the kind used to target gay men in public places during a time when being gay was still illegal. Maharis pleaded guilty. 4 years earlier, he had been the star of CBS's hit series Route 66. Now, at 39, instead of hitting his stride, he faced criminal charges that would follow him for life. News broke fast. Within hours, headlines screamed about the fall of a heartthrob. The language was cruel, dripping with the era's homophobia. Studios stopped calling. Casting agents who once chased him now avoided him. Rumors about his sexuality had floated around Hollywood for years, but the arrest turned whispers into proof. People even began to revisit his 1963 exit from Route 66, wondering if the same reason had been there all along. 7 years passed, but the shadow of that night never left. Then, on November 21, 1974, it happened again. Maharis, now 46, was arrested at a Los Angeles gas station with 33-year-old hairdresser Perfecto Tellez. Both were charged with sex perversion. Bail was $500, a sharp bite in a year when most people earned about $150 a week. The arrest report claimed police caught them in the act. The location and timing made it worse. A gas station bathroom in broad daylight on a Thursday afternoon. The tabloids couldn't resist. This was just a year after Maharis had posed nude for Playgirl, becoming only the second actor ever to do so. The scandal felt like it was begging for headlines. The coverage was brutal. Papers called it the final nail in his career. In December, Gay Scene magazine printed every detail, complete with photos. The story shot through Hollywood in days. In the 1970s, scandals like this didn't fade. They stuck, permanent and public. Hollywood's response was swift. MGM, Paramount, Warner Brothers all shut their doors. Casting agents cut him off. He went from six-figure paychecks to whatever work he could find. Even his music career, with 6 albums on Epic Records, quietly ended. He later said it was like becoming invisible overnight. The Playgirl centerfold in July 1973 had already stirred controversy. The magazine was brand new, barely a month old, and wanted a big name to give it credibility. Male nudity in mainstream media was rare, and Maharis went all in. He thought it might kill the gossip about his personal life. Instead, it gave the public more to talk about. When Hollywood stopped offering lead roles, Maharis turned to Las Vegas nightclubs and summer stock theaters. It was a hard shift. These were the stages for fading stars and young hopefuls, not primetime heartthrobs. He performed for tourists, painted between gigs, and took any job that kept him connected to the industry. In 1976, he landed a supporting role in ABC's Rich Man, Poor Man, one of television's first big-budget miniseries. It was a hit, winning 4 Emmys and pulling massive ratings. But his role was small. The show was built around fresh faces like Peter Strauss and Nick Nolte, with fading stars like Maharis filling in the edges. By the early 1980s, his film work included The Sword and the Sorcerer, a low-budget fantasy that critics panned, but audiences loved. It became the most profitable independent film of 1982, yet his role was minor. Still, it showed he was willing to work in anything to stay on screen. Guest spots on Fantasy Island, Murder, She Wrote, and other series carried him through the late 70s and 80s. These appearances were steady but uninspiring. They were the kind of work television reserved for actors whose glory days were behind them. His last credited role came in 1993's horror film Doppelganger. After that, George Maharis quietly stepped away from acting, leaving behind a career that once burned bright but was ultimately undone by a time and a world that would not forgive him. In the early 1990s, George Maharis did something few actors ever dare to do. He walked away from Hollywood completely. By 1993, at 65 years old, he had retired from acting after his last role in the horror thriller Doppelganger. He split his time between Beverly Hills and New York City. But he wasn't chasing movie scripts anymore. Instead, he devoted himself to impressionistic oil painting. This wasn't a passing interest or a way to pass time in retirement. He threw himself into it with the same focus and energy that once made him a television star. His work was displayed at the Elizabeth Collection in Rochester, New York, earning him recognition in the art world. In 2007, when asked about his life, he said he was still painting, still overseeing his investments, still living in the quiet world he had built for himself, far away from film sets and television studios. Decades later, his name surfaced in an unexpected way. In 2019, Quentin Tarantino mentioned George Maharis in an interview about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tarantino didn't just drop the name for nostalgia's sake. He grouped Maharis alongside actors like Ty Hardin, Vince Edwards, Ed Burns, Fabian, Tab Hunter, George Peppard, and George Chakiras as icons of a certain Hollywood era. These were the leading men of the 1960s, men whose style and presence defined a generation's idea of glamour. At the time, Maharis was 91 years old and had been retired for over 25 years. The tribute was a rare kind of recognition, the kind that says your impact lasted long after your career ended. The film itself was a hit, earning 10 Oscar nominations and winning 2, ensuring that Maharis's name reached a younger audience who had never seen Route 66 on their television screens. On May 24, 2023, at exactly 6:24 p.m., George Maharis died at his Beverly Hills home. He was 94 years old. His longtime friend and caretaker, Mark Bahan, was by his side. The cause was complications from hepatitis, the same disease that had shadowed his life for more than 60 years. Bahan shared the news on Facebook, describing him as a star of Route 66, a stage performer, a singer, an artist, and above all, a man who would do anything for anyone. Maharis had no immediate family left. His Beverly Hills home, where he had spent his final decades painting, became the place where his life ended. There was a cruel symmetry to his final illness. Hepatitis was the same disease producers accused him of faking back in 1962. He had contracted it that year after being injected with contaminated vitamin B12, just after shooting a rescue scene in freezing 17-degree water. When he asked for a lighter schedule to recover, producer Herbert B. Leonard accused him of lying, even bringing up Maharis's homosexuality in an attempt to undermine him. The producers claimed he was using illness as a way to break his contract for movie deals. In 1963, he left Route 66, and with it, the peak of his television career. For decades, he defended himself, insisting the illness was real. The cause listed on his death certificate, complications from hepatitis, was proof that it always had been. The same disease that ended his time on Route 66 returned 61 years later to end his life.